welcome back to our channel. In 1982, the United States stood at a crossroads. The economy was rebounding from a deep recession, technology was beginning to accelerate, and Ronald Reagan's presidency was reshaping the nation's identity. Amid these shifting tides, millions of Americans went about their daily routines, carrying pocket change that seemed ordinary, forgettable even. Pennies, nickels, quarters, and of course, the Roosevelt dime. A tiny coin, just 10 cents in face value, light enough to lose in the depths of a coat pocket, but symbolic nonetheless. For many, the dime was just a coin. But for a few, especially those with sharp eyes and a bit of patience, it would become a doorway to one of the most fascinating mysteries in American numismatics, the 1982 Roosevelt dime. At first glance, there's nothing extraordinary about it. Franklin D. Roosevelt's iconic profile is stamped with the same stoic resolve it had displayed since 1946. Liberty, in God we trust, the date, 1982, and a subtle mint mark just beside the neck, usually a P for Philadelphia or a D for Denver. On the reverse, a torch flanked by olive and oak branches symbolizes peace and strength, with United States of America curving over the top and one dime below. Simple. Functional. Familiar. But buried in the flood of ordinary 1982 dimes, something quietly changed, something so small that it nearly went unnoticed for years. The U.S. Mint was undergoing a significant shift that year. To reduce costs and improve production, it began experimenting with die and mint mark practices. Traditionally, mint marks were hand-punched into the dies used to strike coins, a labor-intensive process with room for inconsistency. But in 1982, that began to change. New technologies introduced machine-punched mint marks, intended to standardize production. But as with many transitions, some errors slipped through. Some 1982 dimes struck at the Philadelphia Mint, where coins historically bore no mint mark, suddenly did carry one. Others, however, bore nothing at all, even though by then, Philadelphia had started using a P to distinguish its coins, and that's where the story takes a turn. A small number of 1,982 dimes were struck without any mint mark. No P, no D, just Roosevelt and the date, clean and silent. These weren't struck in San Francisco, and they weren't intended to be special. They were simply mistakes, coins that slipped through without a mint mark on the die. The omission was subtle, but for collectors, it meant everything. It was a ghost in the system, a whisper of imperfection in a world of rigid uniformity. And because dimes were produced in such massive quantities, hundreds of millions, no one noticed at first. It wasn't until sharp-eyed collectors in the early 90s began noticing the anomaly that the 1982 no-mint mark dime began making headlines. Imagine this. A coin collector in Pennsylvania, casually sifting through loose change from a grocery run, notices something strange. He's not looking for treasure, just sorting coins by date as a hobby. Then, one dime catches his attention. 1982, Philadelphia issued. But no P. That shouldn't be possible. He checks again. Still nothing. Puzzled, he flips it over. Everything else checks out. The reverse design is intact, the lettering is clear, the reeded edge is present. But the missing mint mark nags at him. He pulls out a coin guide, then a magnifier. Soon, he realizes he's holding something incredibly rare, a coin with a story, a mistake that shouldn't exist. Over the years, more examples surfaced. But they were rare, very rare. Most had been spent unknowingly, used in payphones, vending machines, or given as change at corner stores. Few survived in pristine condition, especially in uncirculated or mint state. The ones that did became legends in the collecting world. Their simplicity made them all the more captivating. There were no double dies or broad strikes. Just a missing letter. And yet, that absence told a tale of transition, of overlooked details, of chance. What makes these coins even more elusive is the condition factor. Finding any 1982 no-mint mark dime is hard. But finding one with full strike detail, no wear, and that brilliant uncirculated sheen? That's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Only a tiny handful have ever been discovered in such immaculate condition, often tucked away in rolls or collections by accident. Each one is a time capsule, a survivor of both the minting mistake and the wear and tear of decades, and then there's the mystique. It's not just the error or the scarcity. It's the idea that something so small, so easily overlooked, could become so valuable. That a single missing letter could turn a coin worth 10 cents into a national curiosity. That a quiet little dime from 1982 could end up as a centerpiece in a collection worth more than a car, a house, or even a college education. It's the perfect blend of rarity, condition, and history. Today, the 1982 Roosevelt dime without a mint mark is not only one of the most coveted errors of its kind, it's also one of the most valuable. Collectors hunt for it with dedication, coin dealers recognize it on sight, and stories continue to circulate about people who found one in a handful of change and didn't realize what they had. And now, in recent times, an exceptional example, flawless in condition, untouched by circulation, and gleaming with its original luster, has been verified by experts and appraised with an astonishing value of $132,000. 1984 was a year that carried with it the full weight of momentum, a time when the United States, having weathered an economic storm in the early 80s, found itself accelerating into a new era of prosperity, consumerism, and global influence. Technology was beginning to shape everyday life, MTV had already changed pop culture, and Americans were looking ahead with a new kind of confidence. Amid all the flash and optimism, there was still the simple rhythm of everyday life: work, school, gas stations, corner stores. And within those daily routines, something small passed from hand to hand, rarely considered but always present: the dime. The Roosevelt dime, specifically, one of the most underappreciated yet critical coins in the U.S. currency system. That year, like so many before it, the U.S. Mint produced millions upon millions of these little silver-colored coins. At first glance, there was nothing particularly special about them. They bore the same image Americans had seen for decades: President Franklin D. Roosevelt in profile, his features calm, thoughtful, carved into the coin with precision. Liberty stood proudly along the left rim, while "In God We Trust" nestled below his chin. The date, 1984, was etched clearly, and just beside Roosevelt's neck, a tiny letter, either a P for Philadelphia or a D for Denver. On the reverse, the classic motif remained unchanged: a torch representing liberty, flanked by olive and oak branches, symbols of peace and strength. The words "United States of America" and "one dime" wrapped the design in perfect balance. It was all very ordinary. Or so it seemed, but numismatics, coin collecting, is often a field where the ordinary conceals the extraordinary. A tiny die error, a misplaced mint mark, a metal composition change, these seemingly minor imperfections can rewrite a coin's destiny. And in 1984, nestled among hundreds of millions of dimes, a few remarkable examples began to emerge. Not because of a glaring mistake or a dramatic visual flaw, but because of something subtler. A shift in detail. A nuance in strike. A quality of preservation so rare that it elevated an otherwise common coin into the realm of legends. This story begins, not in the halls of the mint or the vaults of collectors, but in the everyday routines of Americans. In lunch counters and soda machines. In office drawers and school cafeterias. A 1984 dime could be found anywhere, but only the keenest eyes would ever suspect one of being worth more than a meal. Most of them were spent and forgotten, their edges dulled with use, their luster faded by time. But there were a few, just a few, that escaped the wear and tear of daily life. Set aside, maybe by habit or happenstance, tucked into a coin jar or a sealed roll. Protected. Preserved, and these, it turned out, were different. Under magnification, their quality was unmatched. The strike was bold, crisp, showing detail in Roosevelt's hair, jawline, and even the flame of the reverse torch that was rarely this defined. The fields were smooth, unmarred by nicks or blemishes. The luster? Radiant, flowing like ripples across a still pond. These weren't just mint state coins, they were exceptional mint state coins. The kind that makes seasoned collectors stop and take notice. But it wasn't just their beauty that mattered. It was what they represented. 1984 wasn't known for a dramatic error in the dime series. There were no famous double strikes, no missing mint marks, no widely known off-center anomalies. But that's what made these gems all the more astounding. Their value came from sheer perfection, an accident of circumstance and preservation. Coins that shouldn't exist in such pristine form. A few were likely struck early from newly polished dies, giving them that extra sharpness. Others may have been tucked away immediately after minting, never to jingle in a pocket or slide through a vending machine. And all it took was for a few of them to survive the decades unscathed. Word started to spread in collector circles. There were whispers of that one 1984 dime found in a sealed roll, untouched since the 80s. Of another spotted at a Midwest coin show, where a dealer couldn't believe the condition. These weren't just coins, they were time capsules. Perfectly preserved slices of 1984, with every ridge, curve, and engraving as sharp as the day they were struck. The more experienced collectors knew just how rare this was. And as grading services began certifying these coins, assigning them the highest possible marks, their reputation soared. One day, a young collector stumbled upon one in his late grandfather's coin box. The box had been sitting untouched for years, tucked away in an attic beneath old newspaper clippings and family letters. Inside, neatly rolled coins were stacked with handwritten notes. Most were ordinary. But one dime caught the boy's attention. 1984, sharp. Gleaming. He brought it to a local coin shop, more curious than hopeful. The dealer's reaction? Stunned silence. Then, slowly, a smile of disbelief, because the collector had found one of the few. One of the dimes that defied time, use, and probability. A coin so impeccably struck, so well preserved, that it was in a category all its own. Its surfaces flawless, its strike flawless, its story unbelievable. It was sent for grading, authenticated, and declared a top specimen, one of the finest known examples of the 1984 Roosevelt dime. Today, in the world of rare coin collecting, stories like this are the stuff of legends. And as values rise and collectors race to secure the best of the best, this particular 1984 Roosevelt dime, seemingly just another 10-cent piece, now holds a staggering worth. A brilliant survivor of chance, care, and condition, it has been valued at an astonishing $126,000. The year was 1990. A new decade had dawned, but the echoes of the 80s still hung in the air. The Cold War was coming to a close, technology was creeping its way into everyday life, and the U.S. economy was shifting gears. In households across America, children were discovering the magic of their first video game consoles, while parents kept up with bills, groceries, and gas station fill-ups, all using the coins and cash of the day. Tucked into purses, dropped into vending machines, and jingling in the pockets of everyday folks was a coin so ordinary, it was almost invisible, the Roosevelt dime. One coin, just 10 cents, yet in one rare instance, one miraculous survivor, it would become worth more than a house study. At a glance, the 1990 Roosevelt dime looked like every other dime in circulation. Just 17.91 millimeters in diameter, small and light, struck in a copper-nickel-clad composition. The obverse bore the familiar image of President Franklin D. Roosevelt in profile, his gaze steady, noble. Liberty stretched along the left edge, while "In God We Trust" sat beneath his chin. The date, 1990, stood firm beneath his neck, and the mint mark, a tiny P or D, subtly marked its birthplace. On the reverse, the iconic symbols of the torch, the olive branch, and the oak branch remained unchanged, symbolizing liberty, peace, and strength. It was the same basic design America had trusted since 1946. Millions of these dimes were minted that year, over $1.03 billion in Philadelphia alone, and nearly $1.1 billion in Denver. That's over 2 billion coins. Think about that. 2 billion tiny discs of metal, all moving through the economy like water through a stream. So how, among all that overwhelming sameness, could one dime stand out? How could one dime become so rare, so extraordinary, that its value would reach into six figures? It didn't happen because of a dramatic mistake or a headline-making error. There was no missing mint mark like the infamous 1982 no-P dime. No double dies or off-center strikes that caught the eye right away. Instead, this story is more subtle. It's about perfection. It's about patience. It's about timing. And it starts in the quiet corners of a hobby that sees beauty where others see only pocket change. Sometime shortly after 1990, someone, perhaps unknowingly, set aside a small handful of dimes. Maybe they were collecting coins by year, or perhaps they were rolled up tightly in a bank wrapper and stored in a drawer, a desk, or a shoebox. While most coins went on to suffer the harshness of circulation, scratches, dings, grime, these few were left untouched. Uncirculated. Mint state, and within that tiny, preserved group, there was one. This particular 1990 dime wasn't just uncirculated, it was flawless. A coin that had somehow survived the minting process, the handling, and the packaging with a level of perfection so rare that even the most experienced collectors were stunned. The strike was bold and complete, revealing full details in Roosevelt's hair and facial features. The reverse showed the torch and branches in almost photographic clarity. Its surfaces were smooth, untouched by human hands, and the luster was vibrant, rolling across the coin like silk under light. For most, a dime this perfect wouldn't even be noticed. It would pass from hand to hand in a matter of seconds. But a trained eye saw something else, something exceptional. It was submitted to a top-tier grading service. And when the results came back, it sent ripples through the numismatic community. The grade? As close to perfection as you can get. A top population coin, one of the finest known examples of the 1990 Roosevelt dime, word spread. Not through loud headlines or viral social media posts, but through hushed conversations among collectors, dealers, and grading professionals. They knew that this coin was more than a dime. It was a discovery. A relic. A time capsule of precision and survival. Imagine the journey of that single coin. Minted amid billions, never dropped, never pocketed, never scratched or tarnished. Perfect from the start, and lucky enough to remain that way for more than 30 years. In a world where even the most minute detail can make all the difference, this 1990 dime had become a champion. A unicorn. A legend. The story ends, as all great coin stories do, with a realization. The realization that even something as small, as simple, and as overlooked as a dime can carry immense value, not just in metal, but in rarity, condition, and beauty. And this coin, this single 1990 Roosevelt dime, now carries a value that defies all expectations. Because today, it stands proudly with an estimated worth of $118,000. 1999, the final year of the 20th century. It was a time when the world stood on the edge of a new millennium, with excitement, anxiety, and wonder coursing through the veins of society. The dot-com boom was at its peak. People were talking about Y2K, worried that the world's computers might crash when the clock struck midnight. Cell phones were becoming common, and the internet was slowly but surely reshaping the world. Amid all this anticipation and noise, something small, something barely noticeable, quietly entered circulation, just another coin to most, but to a select few, the beginning of a legend. It was a dime. A simple, ordinary-looking Roosevelt dime minted in 1999. Just 10 cents. Small enough to be lost under a car seat, forgotten in a pocket, or dropped between the cushions of a couch. But in that unassuming coin lay something extraordinary, something that would take years, even decades, to be discovered, understood, and valued. The 1999 Roosevelt dime was part of a long-standing tradition that dated back to 1946, when the U.S. Mint first introduced the design to honor Franklin D. Roosevelt. The design remained consistent, Roosevelt's strong profile facing left, the word Liberty etched along the left rim, In God We Trust beneath the chin, and the date, 1999, sitting just below the neckline. The reverse, with its striking combination of torch, olive branch, and oak branch, was a quiet yet powerful representation of liberty, peace, and strength. In 1999, the Philadelphia and Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of these dimes, over $1.2 billion in total. These coins were everywhere, filling pockets and jars, spent at gas stations, slipped into vending machines, given as change in small-town diners and big city stores alike. And among them all, was one. One dime, different. Not by design, not because of a glaring mint error, but because of its immaculate survival, a quiet perfection hiding in plain sight. It wasn't a coin that shouted its rarity. There was no double die to draw attention, no missing mint mark to cause confusion. No dramatic misstrike. This coin whispered. Its story was one of silence, patience, and unexpected destiny. Someone, somewhere, maybe a collector, maybe a curious saver, set aside a small batch of 1999 dimes. Maybe they came straight from a fresh roll at the bank. Maybe they were kept in a coin folder or slipped into a plastic flip. Years passed. The world changed. The calendar flipped past 2000, 2010, and beyond. Coins were spent, worn down, forgotten. But not this one. This one remained protected, untouched, sleeping through time, and when it finally resurfaced, it caught the eye of someone who knew what they were looking for. The coin was submitted to a grading service, not expecting much, maybe a high mint state grade, maybe not. But what came back was unexpected. The surfaces of the coin were flawless. The luster, radiant. The strike, full, crisp, and complete. Every detail of Roosevelt's face was sharp and defined. The torch on the reverse shone with clarity, its flames rendered in breathtaking relief. The branches looked alive, every vein in the leaves visible under magnification. It was, simply put, a miracle of preservation. A 1999 Roosevelt dime in such pristine condition that even seasoned experts were astonished. Coins like this weren't just rare, they were nearly impossible, collectors whispered. Dealers took notice. The population report confirmed it, one of the finest known examples, if not the finest. A coin not just from 1999, but of 1999, a perfect representation of a moment in time, sealed in metal. Its story isn't one of drama or fanfare. It's a story of subtlety, of attention to detail, of appreciation for something overlooked. That's what makes numismatics so powerful. The idea that a coin, no bigger than a thumbnail, could carry with it such history, beauty, and significance, and now, after all these years, that 1999 Roosevelt dime, minted quietly as one of over a billion, has found its place in the spotlight. Not because of a printing mistake. Not because it was lost and rediscovered. But because it was perfect. Because it waited. Because someone believed it was worth keeping safe. Today, its value goes far beyond its face. It no longer holds just 10 cents. That single, astonishing survivor now commands attention and awe from the coin collecting world. Because now, its estimated worth is a jaw-dropping $108,000. 2010, the world had just stepped into a brand new decade. A decade filled with hope, transformation, and an accelerated embrace of technology. Social media platforms were booming, smartphones were no longer a luxury but a necessity, and the global conversation was shifting toward innovation, sustainability, and digital connection. Amidst this wave of change and progress, something seemingly insignificant emerged into circulation, quietly, unnoticed. A dime. A 10-cent piece. Minted like millions of others. But this one was different. The 2010 Roosevelt dime, struck at the height of modern minting precision, was never expected to be anything more than a means of commerce, flipping through vending machines, getting dropped in cash registers, or vanishing into coffee shop tip jars. It was designed with consistency in mind, reliability, utility. It bore the familiar image of Franklin D. Roosevelt, his resolute profile facing left. A symbol of resilience and leadership, the design had remained untouched since its first appearance in 1946. The word "Liberty" stood tall on the left, "In God We Trust" held steady beneath the chin, and the year, 2010, rested at the neckline, quietly asserting its time of origin. The reverse remained unchanged as well, a lit torch at the center, flanked by an olive branch on the left for peace, and an oak branch on the right for strength. It was classic. Timeless. But also, to many, forgettable. In 2010, the U.S. Mint produced over a billion Roosevelt dimes. At the Philadelphia and Denver mints, precision machinery churned relentlessly, stamping these small silver-colored coins onto planchets of copper and nickel. The work was fast, automated, perfected. There was no reason to think any single dime would be anything more than just another drop in the bucket, and yet, one was. It may have been fate. It may have been luck. Or perhaps it was the sharp eye of a collector who saw something the rest of the world missed. But out of the ocean of 2010 dimes, one glimmered with a kind of silent intensity. It wasn't the result of a minting error. It didn't have a misaligned die or a missing mint mark. No dramatic double strike. No off-center surprise. Its rarity came from something much rarer in the modern world, perfection. This particular dime had somehow evaded the normal wear and tear that destroys the brilliance of most coins moments after they leave the mint. It had not been spent. It had not tumbled in a pocket or scraped across the bottom of a drawer. No, this dime had been protected, preserved, perhaps pulled directly from a freshly unwrapped roll, placed into a coin flip, and stored away by someone who simply had a good feeling about it. When it was finally examined by experts, they paused. Under magnification, the coin's surfaces revealed a mesmerizing display of luster. The fields were mirror-like. The relief details, Roosevelt's hair, the contours of his face, the fine veins in the oak and olive leaves, were rendered with an almost sculptural clarity. The strike was deep and flawless, the rim sharp, the edges clean. It was a modern marvel of minting in untouched condition. Collectors began to talk. Whispers grew louder. Grading specialists confirmed it, a pristine example in a condition so perfect that it ranked among the finest ever known for the year. And not just high grade, but elite. The kind of coin that enters population reports with a 1 next to its grade. The kind of coin that serious collectors dream of owning, even once in a lifetime. Suddenly, this dime wasn't just 10 cents anymore. It was history. It was craftsmanship. It was rarity. It was a reflection of everything coin collecting stands for: the chase, the discovery, the preservation, and the thrill of holding something unique in your hand. Years passed, but the legend of that single 2010 Roosevelt dime only grew. It became the subject of forum discussions, collector club newsletters, and quiet bidding wars behind the scenes. People wanted it, not because it was old, or odd, or flawed, but because it was, in every way that mattered, perfect. And today, as it rests in a protective slab, its value has soared to heights no one could have imagined for a coin made in the 21st century. From a simple 10-cent piece tucked away in a vault to a gleaming symbol of numismatic excellence, this dime stands in a league of its own. Its current value, an astonishing $102,000.